We're doing the nervous system, and it's by Ahsiya Nicholas.
Kayla Augillard.
Danielle, Griffin.
Josephine Cogswell.
Okay. So this is the description of the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the processing center for the nervous system. It receives information from and sends information to the peripheral nervous system. The two main organs of the CNS are the brain and spinal cord. The brain processes and interprets sensory information sent from the spinal cord. Both the brain and spinal cord are protected by the three layers of connective tissue called the meninges. Within the central nervous system is a system of hollow cavities called ventricles. The network of linked cavities in the brain is continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord. The ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid, which is produced by specialized epithelium located within the ventricles called the choroid plexus. Cerebrospinal fluid surrounds, cushions, and protects the brain and spinal cord from trauma. It also assists in the circulation of nutrients to the brain. The major functions of the central and peripheral nervous system. The brain is the control center of the body. It consists of three main components: the forebrain, the brainstem, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is responsible for a variety of functions, including receiving and processing sensory information, thinking, perceiving, producing, and understanding language, and controlling motor functions. The forebrain contains structures such as the thalamus and hypothalamus, which are responsible for such functions as motor control, relaying sensory information, and controlling autonomic functions. It also contains the largest part of the brain, the cerebrum. Most of the actual information processing in the brain takes place in the cerebral cortex. The midbrain and the hindbrain together make up the brainstem. The midbrain is the portion of the brainstem that connects the hindbrain and the forebrain. This region of the brain is involved in auditory and visual responses as well as motor function. The hindbrain extends from the spinal cord and contains structures such as the pons and cerebellum. These regions assist in maintaining balance and equilibrium, movement coordination, and the conduction of sensory information. The hindbrain also contains the medulla oblongata, which is responsible for controlling such autonomic functions such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. The next part is the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a cylindrical shaped bundle of nerve fibers that is connected to the brain. The spinal cord runs down the center of the protective spinal column, extending from the neck to the lower back. Spinal cord nerves transmit information from body organs and external stimuli to the brain and send information from the brain to other areas of the body. The nerves of the spinal cord are grouped together in bundles of nerve fibers that travel into two pathways. Ascending nerve tracts carry sensory information from the body to the brain. Descending nerve tracts send information pertaining to motor functions to the brain to the rest of the body. The next ones are the neurons. The neurons are the basic unit of the nervous system. All cells of the nervous system are comprised of neurons. Neurons contain nerve processes, which are finger-like projections that extend from the nerve cell body. The nerve processes consist of axons and dendrites, which are able to conduct and transmit signals. Axons typically carry signals away from the body. Dendrites typically carry signals towards the cell body. They are usually more numerous, shorter, and more branched than axons. Axons and dendrites are bundled together into what are called nerves. These nerves send signals between the brain, spinal cord, and other body organs via nerve impulses. Neurons are classified as either motor, sensory, or interneurons. Motor neurons carry information from the central nervous system to organs, glands, and muscles. Sensory neurons send information to the central nervous system from the internal organs or the external stimuli. Internal neurons relay signals between motor and sensory neurons. The peripheral nervous system is one of the two major components of the body's nervous system. In conjunction with the central nervous system, the PNS coordinates action and responses by sending signals from one part of the body to another. The CNS includes the brainstem and spinal cord, while the PNS includes all the other sensory neurons. Clusters of neurons called ganglia and connector neurons that attach to the CNS and other neurons. The next one is the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system can be divided into two separate systems, the autonomic nervous system and a somatic nervous system. Peripheral nervous system connects with various organs and structures of the body or established through cranial nervous and spinal nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves in the brain that establish connections in the head and upper body, while 31 pairs of spinal nerves do the same for the rest of the body. While some cranial nerves contain only sensory neurons, most cranial nerves and all spinal nerves contain both motor and sensory neurons. Autonomic nervous system composed of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system regulates involuntary and unconscious actions such as internal organ function, breathing, digestion, and heartbeat. For the sympathetic nervous system, it activates the fight or flight response under sudden or stressful circumstances, such as taking an exam or seeing a bear. It increases physical arousal, raising the heart and breathing rates, dilating the pupils as it prepares the body to run or comfort danger. For the parasympathetic nervous system, it activates in rest and digest or feed and breathe response after these stressful events, which conserves energy and replenishes the system. It reduces bodily arousal, slowing the heartbeat and breathing rate. Together, these two systems maintain homeostasis within the body, one priming the body for action and the other repairing the body afterwards. The somatic nervous system keeps the body adapted and coordinated, both through reflexes and voluntary action. The somatic nervous system controls systems in areas as diverse as the skin, bones, joints, and skeletal muscles. Afferent fibers, or nerves that receive information from external stimuli, carry sensory information through the pathways that connect the skin and skeletal muscles to the CNS for processing. The information is then sent back via efferent nerves, or nerves that carry instructions from the CNS back to the somatic system. These instructions go to neuromuscular junctions, the interfaces between neurons and muscles, for motor output. The somatic system also provides us with reflexes, which are automatic and do not require input or integration from the brain to perform. Reflexes can be categorized as either monosynaptic or polysynaptic based on the reflex arc used to perform the function. Monosynaptic reflexes arcs, such as the knee-jerk reflex, have only a single synapse between the sensory neuron that receives the information and the motor neurons that respond. Polysynaptic reflex arcs, by contrast, have at least one interneuron between the sensory neurons and the motor neuron. An example of a polysynaptic reflex arc is seen when a person steps on a tack. In response, their body must pull that foot up while simultaneously transferring balance to the other leg. And this is the view of the system for the sensory and nervous system.
Next is a description and major functions of the sensory organs and adaptation. The sensory nervous system is the part of the nervous system responsible for processing sensory information. A sensory system consists of sensory receptors, neural pathways, and parts of the brain involved in sensory perception. Commonly recognized sensory systems are those for vision, auditory or hearing, somatic sensation, touch, gustatory, taste, olfaction, smell, and vestibular, balance and movement. The receptive field is a specific part of the world to which a receptor organ and receptor cells respond. Receptive fields have been identified for the visual system, auditory system, and somatosensory system. Sensory systems code for four aspects of a stimulus: modality, intensity, location, and duration. Certain receptors are sensitive to certain types of stimuli. Receptors send impulses in certain patterns to send information about the intensity of a stimulus. The location of the receptor that gives the brain information about the location of the stimulus. The duration of the stimulus, how long it lasts, is conveyed by firing patterns of receptors. Impulses are transmitted to the brain through afferent neurons. Sensory receptors. The initialization of sensation stems from the response of a specific receptor to a physical stimulus. All receptors receive distinct physical stimuli and transduce the signal into an electrical action potential. This action potential then travels along afferent neurons to specific brain regions where it is processed and interpreted. The first type of receptor is the chemoreceptor. Chemoreceptors or chemosensors detect certain chemical stimuli and transduce that signal into an electrical action potential. There are two primary types of chemoreceptors. Distant receptors are integral to receiving stimuli in the olfactory system through both olfactory receptor neurons and neurons in the vomeronasal organ. Direct chemoreceptors include the taste buds in the gustatory system as well as receptors in the aortic bodies which detect changes in oxygen concentration. The next are photoreceptors. Photoreceptors are capable of phototransduction, a process which converts light, electromagnetic radiation into, among other types of energy, a membrane potential. There are three primary types of photoreceptors. Cones are photoreceptors which respond significantly to color. In humans, the three different types of cones correspond with the primary response to short wavelength, blue, medium wavelength green, and long wavelength yellow and red. Rods are photoreceptors which are very sensitive to the intensity of light, allowing for vision in dim lighting. Mechanoreceptors. Mechanoreceptors are sensory receptors which respond to mechanical forces, such as pressure or distortion. While mechanoreceptors are present in hair cells and play an integral role in the vestibular and auditory system, the majority of mechanoreceptors are cutaneous and are grouped into four categories. The first are slowly adapting type 1 receptors. They have small receptor fields and respond to static stimulation. The next are slowly adapting type 2 receptors, which have large receptor fields and respond to stretch. Rapidly adapting receptors have small receptor fields and underlie the perception of slip. Pacinian receptors have large receptor fields and are the predominant receptors for high-frequency vibration. The next are thermoreceptors. Thermoreceptors are sensory receptors which respond to varying temperatures. While the mechanisms through which these receptors operate is unclear, recent discoveries have shown that mammals have at least two distinct types of thermoreceptors. The in-bulb or Krauss or bull boy corpuscle detects temperatures above body temperature. Ruffini's end organ detects temperatures below body temperature. Nociceptors. Nociceptors respond to potentially damaging stimuli and usually causes the perception of pain. They are found in internal organs as well as on the surface of the body. Somatosensory cortex, which corresponds to your sense of touch, is located in the parietal lobe. The somatosensory cortex is the primary receptive area for the sense of touch. The next is the auditory cortex, which involves hearing. This is located in the temporal lobe. The auditory cortex is the primary receptive area for sound information. The next is the visual cortex, which corresponds to your sense of sight. The visual cortex refers to the primary visual cortex. The next is the primary olfactory cortex, which corresponds to your sense of smell. This is located in the temporal lobe. The primary olfactory cortex is the primary receptive area for olfaction or smell. The next is the gustatory cortex, which corresponds to your sense of taste. The gustatory cortex is the primary receptive area for taste or gustation. The gustatory cortex consists of two primary structures, the anterior insula, located on the insular lobe, and the frontal operculum, located on the frontal lobe. The next is the visual cortex, which corresponds to your sense of sight. The human eye is the first element of a sensory system. The sense of sight or vision enables us to see our external environment. It provides the richest and most detailed source of sensory information. It tells us the things that are around us, gives their location, and provides three-dimensional images of them. The eye. The organ of sight. Each eye is a spherical organ known as the eyeball. It is located in the socket of the skull. Certain muscles in the eyeball enable the eye to move in many directions, thus widening the field of vision. The lens is a transparent biconvex structure which is flexible. The iris is the color opaque disc of muscular tissue that lies in front of the lens. The hole in the center of the iris is called the pupil. Light enters the eye through the pupil. The retina is a light-sensitive inside layer at the back of the eyeball. It contains numerous photoreceptors, which are the two types, the rods and the cones. The next slide is a pathway of nerve impulses from stimulus to response. What is a nerve and how is it transmitted? A nerve is a connected bundle of peripheral axons. Nerves transmit electrochemical signals between points in the body. An external stimulus, such as sound, touch, taste, smell, or sight, triggers the sensory receptor, which generates a low-voltage signal by transferring sodium and potassium ions through the neuron membrane. The signal travels along the bundle of axons until it reaches the spinal cord. From there, the impulse travels through the white matter, axon bundles, to the gray matter, neurons and synapses, which transmits very quickly to the brain. Once the stimulus reaches the brain, the appropriate brain lobe makes a decision, which can be conscious or unconscious, and sends information back down the spinal cord, reversing the electrochemical process. Upon leaving the spinal cord at the proper point, the low-voltage signal travels back along a peripheral nerve to a neuromuscular junction, a place where the muscle tissue is highly excitable. The signal leaves the nerve and spreads around the muscle, causing contraction or expansion.
How the nervous system works with three other systems. First, the muscular system, by the brain picking up on a command and sending electrical impulses to the peripheral nervous system for the muscle fibers to contract and carry out an action that the command. The endocrine system also works in the nervous system through the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, and it gives the pituitary gland specialized hormones that are made by neurons inside of the hypothalamus that inhibit or stimulate hormone production in the pituitary gland. Nervous system works with the integumentary system, the receptors in the skin that pick up on stimulus that comes in contact with the skin and sends signals to the brain to determine how you act. The autonomic nervous system regulates sweat glands. This is done through the sympathetic nervous system by the hypothalamus sensing heat changes in the environment and triggering the sympathetic nervous system to trigger the sweat glands. In comparison with three other animals, cats and humans have very similar brain structure. They have very similar brain structure in gray and white matter, the lobes that the brain is made up with and how those regions are connected. But the difference is that cats have whiskers, which are sensory hairs that are connected to bunches of sensory cells and nerves that are connected to the brain. These play a huge role in how cats have much more sensitivity to stimuli than humans do. With whiskers, they're able to sense stimuli before they even reach it. Air movement can also stimulate these sensory hairs. Dogs also have a similar brain structure to humans, as they are mammals, and most mammals share a common brain structure. But dogs have a different heat perception than humans. Dogs only have perception receptors in their nose. To manage heat, since dogs cannot sweat, they resort to panting or other forms of cooling. There are dangers for dogs because of these factors. For one, they cannot adapt to hot environments as well as humans do. A non-mammal animal that we can touch upon are fish. Fish have extremely different nerve systems to humans. Fishes and humans actually have some similar brain regions like the cerebellum and the brainstem, but they have very much more differences. For one, the cerebellum takes up most of the fish's brain, while in humans it only takes up 15%. And fishes have a very less advanced cerebral cortex than humans.
Diseases affecting the nervous system. Parkinson's disease, a chronic and progressive movement disorder. Parkinson's involves the malfunction and death of vital nerve cells in the brain. Normally, there are brain cells, neurons, in the human brain that produce dopamine. These neurons concentrate in a particular area of the brain called the substantia nigra. Dopamine is a chemical that relays messages between substantia nigra and other parts of the brain to control movement of the human body. Dopamine helps humans to have smooth, coordinated muscle movements. When approximately 60 to 80% of the dopamine-producing cells are damaged and don't produce enough dopamine, the motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease appear. The cause of Parkinson's disease is unknown. The four primary symptoms of Parkinson's disease are tremors, trembles in hands, arms, legs, jaw, and face, rigidity or stiffness of limbs and trunk, or slowness of movement, and postural instability or impaired balance and coordination. The cause of Parkinson's disease is unknown, but several factors appear to play a role, including genes, environmental triggers, the presence of Lewy bodies. Alpha-synuclein is found in Lewy bodies. So, genes. Researchers have identified specific genetic mutations that can cause Parkinson's disease, but these are uncommon. However, certain gene variations appear to increase the risk of Parkinson's disease, but with relatively small risk. Environmental triggers. Exposure to certain toxins or environmental factors may increase the risk of later Parkinson's disease, but the risks are relatively small. Lewy bodies. Clumps of specific substances within the brain are microscopic markers of Parkinson's disease, and alpha-synuclein are many substances found within Lewy bodies. Scientists believe an important one is natural and widespread protein called alpha-synuclein. It's found in all Lewy bodies and in forms of cells that cannot break down. Parkinson's disease usually affects people over the age of 60, and there is no specific test exists to diagnose Parkinson's disease. So, multiple sclerosis. It involves an immune meditative process in which an abnormal response of body's immune system is targeted against the central nervous system. The immune system attacks myelin, the fatty substances that surround and insulates the nerve fibers, as well as the nerve fibers themselves. When any part of the myelin sheath or nerve fiber is damaged or destroyed, nerve impulses traveling to form and from the brain and spinal cord are distorted and interrupted. People with MS typically experience one of the four disease courses: chronically isolated syndrome, relapsing remitting syndrome, primary progressive syndrome, MS, and secondary progressive MS. People with MS typically, while the cause of MS is still not known, scientists believe that the interaction of several different factors may be involved. Immunological factors, environmental factors, infectious factors, and genetic factors. Immune. An abnormal immune meditative response attacks the myelin coating around the nerve fibers of the central nervous system, as well as the nerve fibers themselves. Environmental. MS is known to occur more frequently in areas that are farther away from the equation. Infectious. Since initial exposure to numerous viruses, bacteria and other microbes occurring during childhood and since viruses are well recognized as causes of demyelination and inflammation, it is possible that a virus or other infectious agent is a triggering factor in MS. Genetic. While MS is not hereditary, having a first-degree relative, such as a parent or a sibling with MS, does significantly increase an individual's risk of developing the disease. There are now FDA-approved medications that have been shown to modify the course of MS by reducing the number of relapses and delaying progression and disability to some degree. In addition, many therapeutic and technological advances are helping people manage symptoms. And our last disease affecting the nervous system is ALS, and it is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. Motor neurons reach from the brain to the spinal cord and from the spinal cord to the muscles throughout the body. The progressive degeneration in motor cells in ALS eventually lead to their demise. When motor neurons die, the ability of the brain to initiate and control muscle movement is lost. With voluntary muscle action progressively affected, many people lose the ability to speak, eat, move, and breathe. There are two different types of ALS, sporadic and familial. Sporadic is what is the most common of disease in the U.S., and it occurs 90 to 95% in all cases, and it may affect anyone, anywhere. Familial ALS accounts for 5 to 10% in all cases in the U.S. familial ALS, which means the disease is inherited. In recent years have brought wealth of new scientific understanding regarding the physiology of disease. There is currently one FDA-approved drug, ribosol, but modestly shows the progression of ALS in some people. Although there is not yet a cure or treatment that halts or reverses ALS, scientists have made significant progress in learning more about this disease. ALS usually strikes people between the ages of 40 and 70, and approximately 20,000 Americans can have the disease at any given time, although this number fluctuates. For unknown reason, military veterans are approximately twice as likely to be diagnosed with the disease than the general public, particularly those deployed during the Gulf War. The initial symptoms of ALS can be quite varied in different people. One person may have trouble grasping a pen or lifting up a coffee cup, while other people may experience a change in vocal pitch when speaking. However, progressive muscle weakness and paralysis is universally experienced. The rate in which ALS progresses can be quite quite variable from one person to another. Although the mean survival time with owls is 3 to 5 years, many people live 10 years or more. Owls is a difficult disease to diagnose. There is no one test or procedure to ultimately establish a diagnosis of owls. It is through a clinical examination and series of diagnostic tests, often rolling out other diseases that mimic owls, that a diagnosis can be established. For example, a spinal tap or MRI. And our fun facts. So, the nervous system transmits messages to the brain at 180 miles per hour. The spinal cord, which controls over 10 billion nerve cells, is less than 2 feet in length, and the diameter is about the same of that of an index finger. The brain continues to send out electrical wave signals until approximately 37 hours after death. And there are about 500,000 neurons in the human spinal cord.